I'm sure this guy needs no introduction, but Stefan Johansson and Tim Possingham.
Coming up, guys. Give them a round of applause, please, guys.
Oh, yeah. Welcome. So now, very, very quickly, obviously, Stefan, many of you I'm sure will know, and we'll get an opportunity to see behind the wheel of a race car this weekend. A Formula 1 driver, IndyCar or Champ Car driver, and Le Mans 24-hour winner as well, 3 times class winner at Le Mans as well. So yeah, very special to have him in. Tim Possingham as well, the founder of what we see here today, Adelaide Motorsport Festival, and also event director. And firstly, I mean, go to you, Tim. I mean, this event is unbelievable. It's my first experience being here. And when we're doing a little bit of our research into it, I've seen the trajectory that's on. I mean, I look back, 2014, I think was the first event, 1,800 people turned up. And last year, somewhere around 50,000 people have come. So since you've taken over, I believe it was 2021 maybe, the event has really, it's escalated massively, and something that as South Australians, I think we can be very proud to have in our backyard. So how does it feel to have got this event to where it is today?
Thanks, Scott. Look, it feels fantastic. It certainly feels fantastic at the end of the event because it's a mammoth challenge to get it delivered. I couldn't do it without an amazing team. We've got a really intimate team. All right, we've got a small team, and they put in an incredible amount of effort. All day, all night, very little sleep to get this done. But we've got a shared vision about where we want to take this event. Most of that vision leverages the heritage and history that we have here in South Australia, particularly the track, the circuit. Obviously, we've got the history of running the Formula 1 on the circuit back in 1985. Its 40-year anniversary is this year. And then, of course, what came with Formula 1 was Group A touring cars and a whole suite of other categories. And then later, obviously, V8 supercars and, the supercars we see here today. So this event relies on the authenticity of the place where we're at. Often it's referred to as the Goodwood of the Southern Hemisphere, or people liken it to Goodwood, mostly because it's got a diverse array of cars here and it's in a park-like setting. But it's that authenticity and that heritage and history that we draw upon that really makes it unique and makes it work.
Yeah, it's true, Tim, because we had a coffee and breakfast this morning, and up around the end here, you've got the handprints of the Formula 1 drivers that are still embedded in some of the buildings and the footpaths around. So it is, I guess, similar for us to like Bathurst when you come here because of the heritage. Like, as soon as you walk into the parkland, you get that sort of goosebump feeling, don't you? And yesterday, Scotty and I were out in the NASCAR session driving around here, and the track obviously feels very different to what it does in, when we're here at the Adelaide 500, things like that, but it's still just, I don't know what you thought, Scotty. I mean, you didn't have a great day. We'll touch on that. But I definitely got out of the car at the end of the day. I drove a Cosworth Sierra and also the NASCAR. Probably one of the best days I've had in a long time driving cars yesterday. It was just pure enjoyment. So from my point of view, Tim, thank you for putting the event on because I had a great day yesterday.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's what it's all about. For those of you that don't know the ins and outs of the event, almost the entire event is non-competitive. So we only this year we're timing one category at the end of the event where we have a sort of what we call 10 of the best, a little shootout at the end. But it's all about just having fun. It's all about experiencing cars. It's all about demonstrating cars in the way that they were meant to be driven, making some noise out there, and whether it be drivers like yourselves coming here and having that sort of casual, no pressure, sort of a fun atmosphere, or people just wandering around the site itself and getting access to cars in a way where there's sort of no obstacles, there's no stress attached to it. Everything's made easy. The byproduct of that is that we see people everywhere smiling, whether they be drivers like yourself, maybe not you, Scotty. We'll get to that in a minute. But and the punters out there in the paddock.
Now, Stefan, you've raced so many cars. Just a quick question, mate. Have you ever had the steering wheel fall off?
Yeah, I have actually, but not at speed, thankfully. But leaving the pit lane, it's sort of clunk, clunk, clunk. Yeah, it's in your hands, but managed to stop the car before it hit anything.
Well, we like to.
That's why he made it to Formula 1 and I didn't know. He stopped before he hit anything.
Correct. We like to keep it lighthearted. Those that have listened to the show, you'll know that. But Scotty, tell us what happened yesterday, mate.
So Elliot, as you said, had the best day of his life yesterday, and I probably had a very tough one. I drove the number 8 NASCAR. Now, it's definitely user error, this one, but the steering wheel column has 2 locking mechanisms on it. So I put the steering wheel on, clipped it on the first one, pulled it for the check, thought it was locked on solid, and then lap 4 going through the chicane, which you've done enough laps here, that chicane's pretty bumpy. And lap 4 I've gone through behind Elliot. You say non-competition, but obviously we're still young blokes that think we're much better than each other. So I started chasing him, hit the curb at 2, pulled the steering wheel off the car in the NASCAR, and obviously I couldn't get it back on. I was 3rd gear. I don't know how fast we're going there, but we are moving. And I saw the number 3 NASCAR turn right and around the corner as I veered left and went under the tyre barrier on the exit of the chicane while still holding the wheel. I got to the point I panicked so much that I actually grabbed the steering column and attempted to turn it without the wheel on it. It's crazy what you try and do when you're in full panic mode, but that is one of the scariest things I've ever had happen in a race car. But yeah, as it turns out, I have 2 pins that I need to lock the steering wheel on with, and one is not enough. But unfortunately, we have to own. Our show is all about if you make mistakes as drivers, we own it, and you know, sort of, you know, it takes some of the pressure away from the punters. If you take the piss out of yourself, that's what it's about. But getting back to the event, one thing I really want to touch on is you've done Goodwood a number of times. How do you feel about this event now? You've come out here so many times. How does this compare, and where do you see it heading in the future as well? Do you think that this can really become a globally recognised event? Given, I mean, the cars here definitely put it on that pedestal.
Yeah, I mean, this is my 3rd time now, and you can see the projection since the first time I came here. You know, it's growing and it's getting more and more recognition internationally too. Now, a lot of people are talking about it, you know, among my colleagues, and you know, asking, because I know I've been here, they ask me what it's like, you know, and so on. And you know, for me, it's a great event. I mean, I love coming here, and during the Grand Prix years, everybody loved. This was the favorite Grand Prix. It really was. I'm not just saying that because I'm here now, but it was truly the Grand Prix that everybody were looking forward to. You know, maybe because it was the last race of the year as well, you know, but it was just a great atmosphere. The people of Adelaide was so enthusiastic and really embraced the event, you know, and I feel the same now, you know, with it's just good energy altogether.
Yeah, I think that's something that is underestimated here in Adelaide, is that the car culture. You obviously team involved with Rally as well. If you tell us a bit about your involvement there, I think it really is a place that, you know, there's, again, being biased from Adelaide, I don't believe there is a better place to put on a motorsport event than the Adelaide Parklands circuit. I think we're so close to the city. Stumble across this and you'll fall in love with motorsport. But one thing that really fascinated us as well is you drove really one of my favourite eras of motorsport, I think. But the difference between Formula One and IndyCar was something that came up recently with Will Power we had on the podcast. And I'd love to hear, I think that the difference now is quite a lot, but I imagine when you did both, you went 92 into Champ Car. What were some of the big differences you found transitioning from Formula One into Champ Car, from, you know, the 80s in Formula One and then into the 90s of Champ Car?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that struck me first when I came over to America was just the scene, you know, was so different from Formula One. You know, it's like going back to like raw, pure, like the early days of racing. You know, the tracks were not so sophisticated, but unbelievably demanding, you know, because if you put a foot wrong, you got punished, you know, by not necessarily crashing, but you would definitely, you know, have to come off it, you know, whereas in F1 now, I mean, it's like, you know, you missed the apex or you missed, you know, whatever, you peg it back a couple of feet the next time and you find a limit in 3 laps on every track you go to, you know, whereas in IndyCar, it's still like that today, you know, I mean, it's, you know, if you make a mistake, you're going to get punished, you know, and that's, I think, the way it should be, you know. It doesn't necessarily make it more dangerous, but it's just more demanding because of that.
And is that why you've kept an involvement as well in IndyCar now, managing a few of the drivers?
Yeah.
Is that what attracts you still today to IndyCar? I know it's merged now, but is that something that still attracts you? Is that, I mean, we all love the adrenaline rush and the thrill we get from motorsport, and that is something I'm a big fan of Formula One, but particularly in the last 5 to 10 years when all these circuits, you say, have just become tarmac fields where you can run off and rejoin. But is that something where you still, you know, really enjoy watching IndyCar and seeing drivers be able to manhandle these cars and get something out of them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, I mean, F1 is on a different level completely, you know, and it's gotten even more that way now, for good or bad, you know. I mean, it's so big now, and so thanks to the TV show, you know, it's become massively popular now. But IndyCar for me is still, you know, like from the pure racing aspect of it, forget all the rest of it, but just the pure racing aspect is fantastic. I mean, you know, it's hardcore, like really raw, hard racing every race, you know, and you frankly don't know who's going to win the race at any race, you know. I mean, look at the last one in St. Pete, you know, Paulo started 8th and won the race. Scott was 6th, you know, he should have won the race, but if you had radio, but so you can never predict, you know. The strategy is a lot more, you have a lot more variety on the strategy than you do in F1. And the format, the way they've structured the rules and everything in IndyCar is about as good as it gets from the racing point of view, I think. Never mind their marketing and all the rest of the stuff, which could definitely do with a bit of an upgrade.
It does seem like they're maybe on the up with some of that. I think Formula One set this ridiculous standard now with their marketing, and it does look like, you know, that globally I think is having an impact on motorsport, and particularly with IndyCar now with Fox deal.
The Fox deal is going to make a big difference, I think. Yeah.
We spoke to James Hinchcliffe recently on a show, and he's obviously one of the analysts for Fox. And that was one thing we said, like, I think that's going to really pump it up. You've seen the ads they've obviously done. You're managing a few drivers. So, yeah, it feels like they're taking that NASCAR show but bringing it to open wheel racing, which I think is going to be the perfect mix. Is that your opinion, obviously, Stefan?
Yeah, so I couldn't hear what the last thing you said there.
Yeah, just is that your opinion? Like, you think it's going to really amp up IndyCar?
I think so, yeah. I mean, they've done a great job, I think, you know, with the advertising they've done before. I mean, the rating from the last race at St. Pete was the highest they've had in something like 20 years or something, outside of the Indy 500. So if they can keep that up and grow on that, then obviously it's going to make a huge difference. You know, it's well overdue. I mean, you know, I was in IndyCar or Champ Car when the split happened. And I remember it so, because NASCAR wasn't even a factor back then.
Yeah, right.
IndyCar was way bigger than NASCAR was, you know. And I know, like, it was kind of a threat to F1 because Mansell came over, we had Emerson, you know, a few F1 drivers and so on, and it was getting so popular globally, really. And I think somehow Bernie had something to do with what happened after that, you know, to make sure that, you know, divide and conquer. I mean, I think he convinced Tony George to start his own series, you know, and we know what happened after that.
And Tim, we talk about now, I guess that brings me into this with Fox and everything they're doing to promote events. Is that something, you know, I want to ask, what's next for the Adelaide Motorsport Festival? What can we see, do you think, that would take this event to more people, I guess? And for us with the podcast, something we've seen is, and something we're very excited about here as well, is we will be recording this and putting it out after the event because, you know, it's not that everyone can get here and actually attend the event, but it's something that I think if people could see it, they would appreciate just how special this is to have all these cars, which even for me, I've never seen the range of cars that are here. And it is like you're pinching yourself seeing some of them. You know, what do we think we can do with this festival? And maybe is broadcast something that's on the cards for the future? Because obviously the way it's going at the moment, it's only on the way up. But what's next, do you think, for the Adelaide Motorsport Festival?
Yeah, well, we traditionally have live stream parts of the event the last 2 years. This year we will be doing that again, but we'll only do a very, very small part because, as you know, one of the byproducts of live streaming is that if something goes wrong or something looks a bit clunky, then well, that's what everyone sees, right? So, to be entirely honest with you, we're doing a live session this afternoon, which is combined with a post-produced or pre-recorded piece that sort of highlights from this morning, and we'll push that out early afternoon. So the world will see that, and we obviously share that through some other platforms and some partners sites as well. But we are making a 44-minute TV program this weekend as well. So that'll be on 9 Network, probably late April. And again, we just wanted more control over the curation of what that might look like to try to tell a story accurately of what the event's all about. As
Scotty touched on, Tim, there's amazing cars here. What, I guess, when you get the entry forms through and you know what cars are turning up to your event, what's one that was a big ticket item for you that you've got to the event, but also what's one that you haven't yet had here that you really want, whether it be a driver or a car or a combo of both?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think again, to fit with there's two sides to this. There's what I like, which is almost everything, and what's close to my heart, which would probably be the Mazda 767B, because I used to own a mechanical workshop, so I used to work on cars. I had a team of 8 mechanics that would work with me through the 1990s, and we did a lot of Mazda rotary work. So so that car is iconic. Incidentally, this gentleman sitting next to me drove the 767 at Le Mans, and again rates the engine as, Stefan, one of the best engines of all time. You think?
Absolutely, yeah. It's probably my favorite engine. It was amazing. I mean, it's just it's incredible. It was like an electric car almost, because it was instant torque, and just you couldn't break it. I mean, there's nothing to break on the thing. I mean, it's just there's no parts really. I mean, it's just this big.
What RPM does that spin to? Because they obviously sound like they're doing 20,000 RPM, but what is the RPM of that engine when you were racing it?
It was 11,000 per, but it was three sparks, so it was 33,000 RPM basically. Is what you hear from the exhaust. It's not so bad inside. It's a nice hum inside the car, but outside it's just crazy, the sound from the exhaust.
So you're hearing 33,000 RPM. I thought the NASCAR was humming yesterday at 7,000 RPM.
It's kind of funny because at Le Mans, when you during the night and then you sort of try to go to sleep, but every sort of 3.5 minutes, 4 minutes, we're still running. It's still going.
Yeah, you definitely know if it had stopped running because you'd miss it. But Stefan, you obviously raced here in the Formula One era. What's your favourite car that you raced here back in the F1 days around Adelaide?
Well, the favourite cars are normally the ones you're winning, of course. But, weirdly, the best car I ever drove was one I never got to race, which was the Tolman 85 car. I was supposed to be with Tolman in 85, and the car was designed by Rory Byrne and Pat Simmons, who then obviously went on to do very great things after that. Then I got to drive with Ferrari after the first race in Brazil. So we did the testing, and we were actually quickest in Brazil during the testing with the Tolman. And then they didn't, for whatever, I can't remember the politics of it, but they couldn't get any tires, so they didn't race the first few races of the year. And Tolman released me to go to Ferrari, but the car was amazing. It was so good. And, this is Rory Byrne, is, in my opinion, probably one of the top 3 designers in F1 in history, but no one ever talks about him. He's a very low-key guy, but an absolute genius.
Was there ever a moment in your career, and that might have been one of them, where something didn't come to fruition that you think would have changed the direction of your career? Because the Ferrari at the time, I don't believe it was a tough period, I think, then with the Ferrari. Yeah. But obviously the Tolman at the time might have been the car to be in. But is there a period you look back at and wish something maybe went different?
Yeah, there's always moments like that, right? From time to time. But I think for me had I won the race at Imola, when we ran out of fuel, with 1 lap to go, I think it would have totally changed the dynamic inside the team as well. Because, and then also from a driver's perspective, the first one is always the hardest one, And I'm sure that would have had a huge effect on not just myself, but also the team, And we would have won the race, but what we found out afterwards, there was this tiny little crack in the inlet manifold to the turbos, which was sucking in air. So the engine, the mix, just pushed more fuel in to have the same mixture, So all our calculations, we were right on target to finish the race. But anyway, there you go. If shoulda, coulda, woulda.
It's funny that those things still happen. The Bathurst 1000 only a few years ago, we had issues during the race where we were burning more fuel, and it was an engine map issue with air getting in and running rich, which we didn't find all day, and it destroys your race. So it's something that I can definitely relate to.
Yeah.
Circuits. What stands out to you from when you raced as one of your favourites? I raced British Formula 3. I didn't win the championship like you did, but getting to race on some of those circuits was so iconic. But for me, I felt like they weren't what I expected them to be, because I had in my mind, I guess, what they were in the 90s and even in the 80s. So I'm always fascinated to hear about those tracks, the Nordschleife as well.
Yeah.
what was it like to race at some of those places, and which one? It's probably hard, but which is your favourite circuit that you've raced at?
So the Nordschleife is obviously, it's kind of a different story completely because it's just so different from any other any circuit period. But it is, you either love it or you hate it, I think. But, I love it. It's incredibly challenging, obviously, in every aspect of it, and just trying to memorize all the corners. And then once you're down that, you've got to squeeze every, half a tenth out of every corner, and I don't think you ever get it perfect, but it was, every lap is just amazing, But aside from that, because it's not really been a track we've raced on since the 70s now in anger, but I did the very last race there with a Porsche 956 in 83, and it's probably the most crazy thing I've ever done in a race car. It was unbelievable. It's so fast, and those cars had so much downforce, and no power steering, 8 degrees of caster. The steering was so heavy, And I remember going down from down towards the Swedenkreuz, which is the fastest part of the track. You're doing like 330, 340 Ks. And it's a long left-hander, and the track is very narrow. So you couldn't, if you held the steering wheel like you normally do, it'll just rip out of your hands. So you had to put the seat forward enough you literally held the spokes like this to keep it going in the straight. And then it was completely flat, the whole left-hander. Car had so much, you just hold it on as hard as you could to keep the car on the line, But it didn't lose any grip because it had so much grip, especially at that speed, So, but it was just totally mental,
That's something I've never done wings and slicks. So most of my career has been touring car style of racing, Trans Am style, those big heavy cars. But that's one thing Will Power touched on when he first went to Champ Car. He was saying one of the races on the ovals, he was like propping his arm up. Just because he was so knackered because the grip and the downforce just brutal. But
it's crazy,
I could imagine. The era that you raced Formula 1, massive horsepower. Like it was really, they were pushing the boundaries on physics. I think so, unbelievable. But one thing that we think from the heyday of motorsport, which was when you were in your peak, I believe, there's not too many rivalries anymore. And we feel like athletes now, they're so strung up by their commercial commitments they can't necessarily be themselves, which I think is why our show has been so popular, because we have a couple of beers and tell people what we think. But I'm really keen to know, did you have any great rivalries back in the day? Was there a driver that you just hated or you needed to beat every time? Or you must have amazing stories from the people that were in the paddock then. Like, can you share some of that stuff?
Yeah, I never had any major rivalries as such, because my tactic was always to try to defuse them by kind of being mates with them, but that didn't mean I was going to give them half an inch on the racetrack, but just kind of have that, like a little bit of that, the needle out of the way, because that just makes it worse in my opinion.
So like Jim Richards here in Australia, there's a very famous touring car driver here in Australia.
Yeah. And
they called him Gentleman Jim because he'd be the first guy that would take you out and then come and apologise with a smile.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
For anyone that doesn't know as well, Nordschleife, I think, is 187 corners. So it's a track that really, it blew me away when I first raced at Nürburgring, because we don't get the opportunity to race there anymore at the Nordschleife, but you can actually go and do a lap.
Yeah.
So if you're ever in Germany for a holiday or anything, I highly recommend going and doing a lap. I was 19 at the time and I had a car. I won the British Formula 4 Championship. They gave me a free car. I had no money. And I found out when I got there, I went to pay for my ticket and I found out you actually don't have insurance on your car if you crash. And I actually chickened out, and because I was still I thought, you know what, this place is so crazy. I think even as race car drivers as well, you're always going to try. But it's one of those tracks I regret not doing, and maybe now I would go back and do it. But if you ever get the opportunity, you can actually go and do a lap at the Nordschleife, and I reckon that would have to be one of the coolest experiences in a car you could ever have on a track that is so unique.
Absolutely. Yeah, I highly recommend it. Back in the early days when we did F3 and F2 there, like in the very early 80s.
You raced F3 at Nord?
Did many F3 races there and many F2 races as well. But so, you used to rent a car and then go there. Of course, you spent 3 days just pounding round and round and round trying to learn the track. And I remember one year I was with Chico Serra, I don't know if you remember him, a Brazilian driver, and Andrea de Cesaris.
Yep.
And then myself, we rented a car, and we then altered, and naturally we were trying to beat each other on the lap time around, until Andrea rolled the car. We managed to get it back on 4 wheels and sort of limping back to the rental place.
I've heard good stories of people doing this. One of a guy who looked after me a little bit when I lived in the UK was telling me stories. It was Perry McCarthy, who you may know from a long time ago, and he is a loose unit.
I know Perry.
He's crazy.
Yeah.
And I'd heard stories, I won't say exactly who it was, but he had crashed on a racetrack similar to this, was afraid to, he had no insurance then, but he decided to put his luggage bag between himself and the steering wheel and drive it into a ditch on a public road to say that's where the accident happened, so that he actually did have the insurance. I just laugh about all those stories. You could never get away with that today.
No.
Sorry,
you go.
And what are you doing this weekend at the Adelaide Motorsport Festival? What cars are you driving this weekend? What are you driving? What are you doing?
Well, I'm driving the Mazda, the rotary one, on Sunday, I think, right? And I was supposed to drive this 5000 car, and hopefully I will. But they had some issues with it this morning, apparently. But
Okay.
but
Do we
that's the plan,
see you behind the wheel, Tim, this weekend at all?
See me behind the wheel?
Yes.
I would love to be, but no time. I mean, I did take part a few years ago, so I try to get one session in, mostly so I can sort of see what everyone else is seeing.
Yep.
I mean, I have circuit raced and done a lot of tarmac rally. Mostly did a lot of improved production racing in the early 2000s. So, I mean, I've held a CAMS license, a Motorsport Australia license since I was 16. So, I certainly have done, raced a lot, and I would love to be out here, but we've got something bigger to organise, unfortunately.
And how did this come, this opportunity and what you've done here? How does this come about? We'd love to hear that story.
The actual story of how this event came about was that I was asked by what was the Sporting Car Club, so it's a big car club here in South Australia, to look at other events that they might want to run and come up with some ideas, because I had or have a marketing company and an events company, and we came up with the concept of trying to do something here in Victoria Park and use some of the infrastructure from the Adelaide 500 to run a little circuit sprint. So in year 1, 2014, we ran a circuit sprint here on the Sunday, but on the day before, on the Saturday, we ran a hill climb up Windy Point, which is not far from here, up at Belair. And yes, we had, as you mentioned earlier, we had 1,800 people here. And I can't remember how many cars entered. There might have been 60 or 70 cars entered in both. And then the next year we paired the rally of the time. The government had engaged a company in Tasmania that run Targa Tasmania to run a thing here called Targa Adelaide. So we got the rally paired in with the festival, and that built it a little bit more and gave it some government funding. The main motivation of involving the Sporting Car Club back then was because the clubs are not-for-profit. We could procure some funds to try to, special grant monies to try to get the event going. So that's what happened for a while, and it naturally grew until about 2018. I operated the event, but it actually was under ownership of the Sporting Car Club. Then I exercised my option to own the event, and then took it over, and at the same time I already owned and had been operating the Adelaide Rally. So when we had a Liberal government come into power, they removed the funding for this part of the event, the Adelaide Motorsport Festival. It wasn't until we had the current government, the Malinauskas Labor government, refunded the event, or continued to fund this part of the event, and we got it up and going again, and clearly it's grown year on year. Last year we had 43% growth.
Yeah, it's crazy. And Stefan, what does a ex-Formula One driver, Le Mans winner, what do you do with your days now? You're obviously managing some drivers, but you've got a few other passion projects that you're doing with your art. Can you just tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, I mean, the art is really, sort of taken over my life almost now. That's... I'm very lucky, I feel like, to have found another passion equally strong to my racing, which has been my life since I was 8 years old, really, never had a job my whole life. So it's just but, I did my racing, and then 10 years ago when I finally decided to stop, I've been painting for a very long time, and but only for myself really. And then when I finally stopped driving altogether, then I just channeled all that energy and focus into the art, and that's kind of what I do now. I still do the management, of course, but I'm in my studio from 8 till 8 every day, pretty much, just working, and that's what I love doing.
And if someone does want to buy a piece of your artwork, you're obviously selling it now. Is it a website? Like, where can we find some of your stuff?
Just on my website, stefanjohansson.com. And I have some here at the Sagami and the Pagani Suite as well, some originals. But I sell prints as well and some merchandise and this, that, and the other through my website, yeah.
Have you ever dabbled with, has anyone asked you to do a special car livery or anything like that?
Yeah, I actually did. I don't know if you saw that Porsche I did a couple of years ago. The very cool project actually with the tag. It's called the Tag Turbo Porsche. It's the guy called Dean Lansanti, who's a McLaren expert really. He found out that there was 11 of the old Tag Turbo F1 engines from the 80s in a shed somewhere, and just collecting dust. So he bought all 11 engines and retrofitted them into a 911 from that period. Because that's how when they were testing the engine before they started racing it, they had it bolted in the back of a 911 because it was built by Porsche, back in the day. So it kind of originates from that. And so they built 11 of these cars, and then each car is named after the drivers who used that engine that's in the car. So it's the NL Niki Lauda 85, AP 86, KR 80, Keke Rosberg 86, John Watson, and then myself. So my car is called the SJ87, and then the people that bought that car commissioned me to paint it. You can find it online. It was a really cool project, and it's turned into commercially it's been fantastic. They resold it for more than double what they paid for the car. So. And I'm working on another one like that now, with another brand. So that's kind of, I'm trying to steer it into that, become a little bit of a niche of what I do, maybe, because it ties in very well with my background, obviously, and my history as well. So, yeah.
We often talk about car being deciding factor as a driver with what makes someone fast. It's difficult to drive a slow car to the front, but who stands out to you in all your time in competition, so as teammates or someone you've raced against, that you think was something special that never got to where they should have? Because we all know of the top names that won championships and things, but we often get asked, what's a race that stands out to you that people might never know about, that really you felt was one of your greatest, but also who do you think was one of the drivers you competed against that really stands out? And for me personally, one of the guys I've raced that I thought was amazing, who probably in Formula One never got to where he would have hoped, was actually Kevin Magnussen. I raced him in British Formula 3, and I know Jan Magnussen, obviously, I think he's the most winning F3 driver in one season still today, but Kevin was someone I thought was amazing. Is
Kevin
there someone you come to mind?
Talent. Yeah, but I think the timing for him wasn't the great. I think he was like what happens to a lot of maybe too young when they make it into Formula One and didn't quite have figured out the discipline around it, and what you need to do to get, because he was after all with McLaren, and it's a good team and everything, but I think but I agree with you, it was an opportunity that's kind of squandered there, because he had so much raw talent, just like Kevin does. Yeah. They're amazing, both of them. But otherwise, my view has always been, it's driving a car fast is the easiest part of the job, really. It's all the other stuff you got to figure out, right? The politics, all the things, working internally with the team. You got to get something I try to teach all the drivers I work with, and there's something I learned from Alain Prost, really, who's, for me, was the greatest, certainly in our period, by far, because his work ethic and just how he operated with the team, with the car, was way beyond anyone else at the time, including Ayrton. Ayrton had the raw talent, but he hadn't figured that bit out yet, But the driver is the CEO of the car. You're the boss of this thing you drive in, and you have all these people around you to make sure that you get the best out of everybody and get what you want to win races, basically, And Prost was absolutely brilliant. He had Ron like he played him like a violin, you know. I mean, but that's what you need, you know, and it's something I think that a lot of drivers who maybe have even more talent maybe quite haven't figured out, you know. But I think everybody gets to where they need to be, you know, if they put all the pieces together.
Yeah, and Alain Prost, I mean, he's someone, every time I watch a documentary, he just seemed to put himself in the right spot. It's almost like Lewis did this going to, you know, from McLaren to Mercedes when, you know, it's almost like they're reading the play and they're very smart in that regard.
Right. His intuition or whatever it is been pretty good so far, you know, and I really admire him, you know, for the way he's gone about it. He's got the talent, but I love the way he races more than anything, you know. He's probably the hardest racer out there, but he's always fair.
Yeah.
I can't think of one incident where Lewis did something that wasn't correct, you know, but he races harder than anyone, you know, and I think I admire him for that. Hopefully he'll bring it back so that young kids who wants to be Formula One drivers copy his style rather than some of the other guys, you know, who's a bit dubious to say the least. You know?
Well, it's like, I mean, Max seems to be such a ruthless driver, but it's, I mean, for him, it's obviously his style.
Always, you know, you put yourself in a position where you're going to crash if the other guy doesn't move.
Yeah.
And, you know, so where do you draw the line on that, you know? Yeah.
One thing we always like to ask people who've done so many races, Stefan, is most memorable race that you didn't win and why?
Well, it's been quite maybe Imola, in a way, because it was I mean, if I ever did a perfect race, that was the one, because we were super quick in practice. Then qualifying, I ended up 15 when we found out that they'd forgotten to tighten up the floor. So the floor was like literally dragging on the ground. So the car had no downforce. So I ended up qualifying 15. It was quickest in the warm-up again. And I knew I had a really quick car. And it was just a matter of just, you know, staying on the fuel count the whole time, which I did, you know, and then just literally had the discipline to stay on the number. And I could see I was catching them enough to get the lead with like a lap to go, which I did. And then the fucking thing ran out of fuel.
So. Far out. I mean, one thing, I'm sure there's actually some Scott McLaughlin fans out here. He is a Kiwi, but he spent a lot of his time racing here in Australia, and you're still following the IndyCar Championship. So I think, of course, we know what Will Power's done already, and Scott has a bright future. Has he surprised you with his transition into IndyCar, and do you think, what are your thoughts on Scott McLaughlin in IndyCar?
I think it's brilliant what he's done, you know, coming from a background with no single seat or anything, and adapt to that is probably the most difficult thing you can do.
Yeah.
You know, it's very impressive. I mean, he's clearly a mega talent, you know, there's no doubt about it.
Before we do wrap up now, Tim, what would you recommend for people to get out and have a look at across the weekend? We've obviously got some great people up on stage. I mean, after us, it obviously will go downhill. We're the pinnacle, but no, I mean, what can the fans here at the Adelaide Motorsport Festival look forward to across the weekend?
Well, of course, I'd encourage people to look at everything because everything's on offer. You know, the kids' activities are all free, which is something you don't see at a lot of other events. And then have a really, really good look through the paddock area because, again, you know, you get up relatively close to some of the cars. The shadow Can-Am cars, again, is something that you just wouldn't see on this side of the earth. So definitely have a look at them. Try to have a look at the size of the front wheels on the car. They've got really, really small, tiny dinner plate size wheels, and some of them have actually got 4 wheels or 4 tyres at the back of the car. So they're, you know, really, really unusual. You know, that's an era when these cars almost had no rules. So, you know, pretty much had to have 4 wheels and they had to be covered, but that's about that. So I'd probably have a really good look at those things that we've imported from overseas.
Well, Stefan, Tim, thank you so much for coming. We're getting hurried off the stage by a beautiful Formula One car.
We're about to get escorted off by a Formula One car.
We just want to say thank you so much for everyone coming out. This is amazing. We really appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to Stefan and Tim's stories. For those of you that support Apex Hunters, thank you so much. If you're not a member of a Patreon, please sign up. Otherwise, have a great weekend. Scotty and I will be driving the NASCARs over at Richard White's race team. So Scotty will be in the number 8 Budweiser car. I'll be in the number 3. I'll also be driving the Kenwood Sierra. So if you do see us out and about, give us a wave, have a sound check, give us a thumbs up. But we appreciate you guys coming out, and thanks again, Stefan and Tim, for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Great. Good. Thanks,
Thanks,
yeah. Awesome. Great. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.